For those of you that don't know me, my name is Bill Moore. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Golf Association. And this is a big night for us. I'm pretty excited to be here and to see these faces. I get a little sick of seeing Tom Reidy all the time, all summer, but here he is over there, and there's all these people that look like a Tom Reidy over there. It's very strange to stand here, but I'm the one who's fortunate enough to get to welcome you tonight, and then I get to take vacation and sit at my table and have a few laughs. I'd like to introduce a few people that are here tonight, some of which you'll see later. First of all, I'd like to introduce my Hall of Fame committee members that are here tonight with us that got this going. This is our second class of Hall of Famers, and they did the voting and the work to get this thing underway. First person I'd like to introduce is Iris Stanek. Iris, if you could stand up and wave to everyone. There's Iris in the back. We also have Iris's worst half, Ed Stanek, right next to her there. Sherry Heath. Sherry, I believe, is right back there as well. Joe Enright. And our president and the master of ceremonies tonight will be up here after dinner, and that's Dick Galvin. Okay? So when Dick gets up here later, everyone has to stop eating immediately, no clanging of any forks or knives or anything like that. He's a very serious gentleman over there. He does this all the time. Also, I'd like to thank some of our invited guests that came out here tonight from our brother and sister golf associations. I'd like to introduce Dan Overbeck, the Rochester District Golf Association president. And on his right is Stu McGow, fellow Notre Dame grad. We're trying to get the score of the game right now, but he's the Syracuse District president. I'd really like to thank them for coming out today and joining us here. It's a real honor to have you folks here tonight. To honor everyone, to honor some of the people that have been great contributors to golf, not only in New York State, but for the New York State Golf Association. And the one thing that I always keep in mind when we're voting and when we're talking about the Hall of Fame is we're out there running championships and running tournaments all the time, and there's so many golfers out there that are in love with, they say they love golf, but they're in love with their game. These folks that are here tonight, and these folks that are getting inducted, love the game. And I think that's what sets them apart from everyone. So tonight is about laughter, it's about fun, it's about stories. So please, everyone, enjoy your dinner, tell some stories. And we're looking forward to hearing from you after dinner. So enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you in about an hour. Thank you.
Welcome to the 2015 dinner and induction ceremony for the State Hall of Fame. This is a night to celebrate 5 people who have given back to golf. One career was very short, many careers were very long, but they all had a great impact on golf in this state. The first person we want to introduce is John Konsek. At the first meeting of the Hall of Fame committee, Joe Enright gave us the name of John Konsek as a potential candidate. I had not heard of John Konsek before that night, or that afternoon. After reading a brief summary of John's amateur record, he was a unanimous vote to be inducted into the class of 2015. His record was just really, on the whole, very amazing. I'd like to invite Joe Enright to the podium to introduce John Konsek and his exceptional amateur career.
Good evening. Distinguished honorees and guests. As Dick said, he had never heard of John Konsek. I had, but I really didn't know much about him. Last winter, a request went out from the New York State Golf Association to all state committee members asking for nominees for our second Hall of Fame class. At the same time, coincidentally, I was doing some archival work in my position as a historian at Lancaster Country Club outside Buffalo. And I was doing some work on 1950s files, and I came upon a brief reference in a news clipping to a young man named John Konsek. And while I had some familiarity with the name, as I said, I knew that he had been a well-respected local amateur and who had gone on to become a physician. Other than that, I knew very few specifics about him or his career. Curiosity and the power of Google search, however, unlocked some details about John that were frankly astounding to me. Not only did John have a phenomenal amateur career, but it had almost been totally compressed into a brief 7 or 8 years. It essentially ended when John took up his medical studies. He began his serious golf in the 1950s, playing with his brother and friends at the Grover Cleveland Municipal Golf Course in Buffalo, while also hitting large numbers of golf balls at the driving range that his dad owned. Recognizing his budding talent, his dad enrolled John in golf lessons with Jack Pritchard, the pro at Park Country Club. And in his early teens, John played as a junior member at Lancaster Country Club, my home course, where his parents were members. He soon was offered his own membership at Brookfield Country Club, where he remained a member for about 9 to 10 years. Here and at Purdue University, where he played intercollegiate golf from 1957 to 60, John honed his game into a remarkably successful, albeit short-span career. John graduated from Purdue in 1960 at the age of 20 and pursued his medical degree at the University of Buffalo Medical School for the next 4 years. Now for some of the details of why John needs to be in the Hall of Fame. In 1953, when he was 13, John played in the International Junior Masters Tournament at East Aurora Country Club. This was and remains one of the elite junior tournaments in the nation. John did not win, but he did win in 1954, 1955, and 1957, and he won medalist honors in 1955, 6, and 7, and to date, no one has equaled this record. In 1957, John won the New York State Golf Association Junior Amateur Championship at Wanaka Country Club, and the following year, John won the 1958 State Men's Amateur at Yanandasis in Utica. He added a second championship the next year at Country Club of Troy, and in 1960, an unprecedented streak yet to be matched, John won his third consecutive men's am, that time at Locust Hill here in Rochester. It might be noted that in 1961, the following year, at Onondaga in Syracuse, John placed second to our Hall of Fame member, Don Allen. And this was especially meaningful for Mr. Allen, who has consistently insisted that John Konsek was the most talented golfer he had ever seen. In 1959, John won the inaugural Porter Cup in Niagara Falls Country Club, and he followed that up in 1961 with a second win. And in 1960, John won the Buffalo District Championship, shooting a remarkable 61 at Park Country Club, which saw him start with 2 eagles and shoot an astounding 9 under par on the front 9, which was a par 37. John's collegiate career at Purdue, playing under legendary coach Sam Voinoff, was no less spectacular. From 1958 to 60, John led the Boilermakers to 3 straight Big Ten championships. John was selected as a first-team NCAA All-American for the same 3 years. And in 1958, he was runner-up for the overall NCAA individual medal honor. He later received the Big Ten Medal of Honor in 1960 as a senior. A highlight of his 1960 season was winning 2 out of 3 matches head-to-head against a fellow from Ohio State named Jack Nicklaus. John's 33 on the final 9 holes of the conference title match beat Jack by 2 strokes. And it also beat the 3rd place finisher by 15 strokes. The same year, John paired up with Jack Nicklaus as teammates on the 1960 USGA America's Cup team. At the time, and for those you might not know, it's a biannual amateur competition put on by the USGA where the U.S. competed against the best amateurs of Canada and Mexico in the years, and it alternated with the Walker Cup. At the Ottawa Hunt and Golf Club, John and his partner, Dr. Frank Taylor, earned the USA only 1 point, and that was the only point on day one, in something we don't hear of too much, a 3-ball 6-sum match. Over the next 2 days, the U.S. rallied and ended up defeating Canada, I believe, by 1 point. Dr. Konsek was able to test himself against the world's top players by qualifying for play in the U.S. Opens of 1958 and 60. And he also had an invitation to play in the 1961 Masters, but was forced to decline due to his medical studies. John's competitive finale was winning the prestigious Monroe Invitational in 1964. He commented to me that he was able to play the tournament, which he had also previously won in 1959, because he had a little time off after finishing med school. He was apprehensive, he said, because he only played a few rounds of golf in a very long time, and of course he won. John went on to continue his medical studies in Chicago and established his medical career as a highly respected oncologist and hematologist in Wisconsin, from where he retired approximately 15 years ago. And he now lives with his wife Marlene in Pawleys Island, South Carolina, where they moved permanently a few years ago. A Hall of Fame induction is not unfamiliar to John. In 2003, he was inducted into the Purdue University Intercollegiate Athletic Hall of Fame. And in 2005, he was inducted into the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame. Now, there's probably not a person in this room who has not or will not ask himself the question, or herself the question, what might have been if John had turned pro? In 2004, Jack Nicklaus famously told a reporter from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and I quote, "Had John turned professional, he definitely would be in the Hall of Fame by now. I think John missed the opportunity to be one of the greatest golfers to ever play the game." From Jack. It's quite a statement from arguably the greatest golfer of all time. But John Konsek followed his heart and his dream to be a physician. And I suspect that there are many, many unreported comments from less famous people who have been patients of John Konsek, and they may say simply, "Thank you, Dr. Konsek. Your treatment saved my life." With the proper amount of perspective, there is no comparison. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and privilege to present Dr. John Konsek.
First of all, I'd like to thank the New York State Golf Association for this honor. I'd also like to thank the Country Club of Rochester for hosting the dinner and the ceremony. It's fun coming back to Rochester again because in my junior golf career and my amateur career, the city of Rochester and the golf courses in Rochester had been very gracious in not only supporting junior golf and amateur golf tournaments, but also in supporting the qualifiers for the National Amateur, the National Open, and they continue to do so up until this time. I would like to congratulate also the Urzetta family on their honor tonight for Sam. I met Sam for the first time when I was a young teenager and I was playing in a Pro-Am with him, and I was scared. I think he sensed that because he came up to me before we started and just talked to me and settled me down to the point that I had a great time playing with him, and what started out as a fear ended up with a friendship that lasted many years until I left Western New York. Golf has been good to me. It was one phase of my life that I will have I forever will have memories of good friends, good travel, playing good golf courses. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Jack Pritchard, who has been alluded to earlier. Jack Pritchard, the pro at Park Club in Buffalo, was to me a man who turned a person who played golf into a golfer. I took lessons from him initially when I was probably 13 or 14 years old. And he taught me how to hit a ball square and how to hit it straight. He taught me how to manage a golf course so that I wasn't afraid to play any golf course that I could. He then taught me how to shape shots so that I had a go-to shot to stay away from trouble. And if ever there was anyone that allowed me to progress and to have the success that I had, it was Jack Pritchard. After junior golf, I got a scholarship to Purdue, and this was unusual because there weren't many scholarships that were given out in the mid-1950s. And certainly if there was a scholarship, it was given out in the southern states. And the northern boys weren't too high on that list. I had met Sam Voinoff, the golf coach at Purdue, at a national open, at a national amateur, and at a junior amateur tournament a few years before. And just a few days before school started, I got a call from him, and he offered me a golf scholarship to Purdue. Now this was rather exciting, but a little daunting for a 16-year-old kid who's going away to college, who has never really been away. But that night I was on a train to Purdue with my golf clubs in a suitcase. Now, the one thing that was favorable at this time was the fact that freshmen couldn't compete. The theory being in the NCAA athletics at that time was that freshmen should get their feet on the ground, learn how to be a student as well as an athlete, and so you couldn't compete until you were a sophomore, and so we had 3 years of eligibility. And this was a godsend to me because it allowed me to learn how to be a student as well as an athlete, and I had my success, I think, partly because of this in college. As mentioned earlier, we had a very successful college career on the Purdue golf team. I had a very successful college career individually, and culminated in my senior year when I did have the matches against Jack, and especially the fact that Jack had beaten me about 2 years before in the junior amateur nationals when I double bogeyed the last hole, and I'll never forget that. I had a one-shot lead coming into the last hole, and I double bogeyed, and that was it. But it was very gratifying to be able to do what I did in the Big Ten Championship in 1960. At the end of the summer of 1960, there was a big question in my mind, and there was a big question in a lot of people's mind as to what I was going to do. I had already been accepted to medical school, and I had made up my mind that I was going to go. A lot of people tried to talk me out of it, including my family. Nonetheless, the decision was made, and in essence, that was the end of my competitive career. I did play a few tournaments after that, mostly because I was committed to do that. But the one thing that was determining factor in my mind is that I probably didn't want to play professional golf. And that was plus the fact that I wanted to be a physician. And I started medical school and finished in 1964. By that time, I had married Marlene, whom I had met at Purdue, and we moved to Chicago, where I pursued my residency and fellowship. After I finished my fellowship, we moved to Wisconsin, where I set up practice and was affiliated with the Affinity Medical Group for 30 years. I tried to play some golf there, but it became evident that this was not going to work. We had 3 boys at that time who were interested in other things, and between soccer and hockey and raising a family, basically it just wasn't going to work. So I gave up golf. I didn't play at all from 1979 until I retired in 2000. And then with the help of medical technology and a new plastic hip, I was able to swing. And I've played a little golf since that time, mostly with friends, a group of friends in Wisconsin, and more recently a good group of golfing friends down in South Carolina. I have no regrets. The first phase of my life was filled with golf, and it was very intense. The second phase of my life was filled with medicine and was very intense but very gratifying. Right now, I play recreational golf, or as my wife would say, giggle golf, where you giggle and hit. But I have been happy. It's worked out well, and I want to thank everybody for this great honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Konsek. Our next inductee, we wanted to have at least one person who was a volunteer with the State Association over the years. And when the committee met, we had all written down names of people that we wanted to suggest for various reasons. And the only person that was on everyone's list, all 7 people, came in with the same name. And so therefore it was unanimous before we even discussed it. And I would like to invite Tom Reidy Jr., who is a professor of history at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, to come up to the podium and introduce his father, Tom Reidy, as a 2015 member of the class of the Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Well, this is a privilege. I get to introduce my dad into the New York State Golf Hall of Fame, Golf Association Hall of Fame. Many of you know my dad. He's the guy driving around in the car telling you where the nearest point of relief is. You know, what are the options with a lateral water hazard? No, you can't touch that out-of-bounds stake. That has to stay there. That would be my dad. Some of you who I see in this room have known him for years. You've traveled with him. You've worked with him. You've played rounds of golf with him. And because of that, you would know that his love for the game is deeply rooted. And I thought we should talk about the roots of this, because I think it sheds a lot of light on who he is, and sort of by extension what the Golf Association and amateur golf is all about. Like many of his generation, my dad began golf in a caddy program. He started caddying at Elmira Country Club in 1947. And that same summer, he was 12 years old, and that same summer he was given a set of clubs by members of Elmira. And so he started playing a set of 6 clubs, I believe. he told me. And it grew, and he worked at it, and he played. But the more telling thing, I think, and I never thought about this till I heard he was being inducted, is that when he was 12 years old, that was 1 year after his father had passed away. And I believe, and he never talked about this, but I thought about it a lot, I think golf became a place of refuge, sort of a second home. I think that the golf professionals at Elmira, the caddy masters, the members, became sort of surrogate fathers for him over the years. And I'm bringing this up because I just think one of the wonderful things about this sport, this game, and about amateur golf, is that it gives people like my father, who could have, a 12-year-old boy who loses his dad, could easily go down the wrong path. This sort of this grounding, this foundation, and it gets an opportunity to be around good people. It would also, on the other hand, it gives us, now that, if we're fortunate enough to be members of a club or to play this wonderful game, an opportunity to help and mentor kids. So I think this is, to understand my dad is to understand that my dad, as I said, he worked at a golf course, but he also played. He's a good player. He's a fine player. He played collegiately at Canisius College. I heard earlier that John was going to go to Canisius for a minute there, and then got his call from Purdue. They could have been teammates my dad's senior year. My dad won a club championship at Elmira Country Club. I was caddying for him. He taught all of us how to play. My daughters didn't take to it, but they married people who did. So we're a golfing family. He still shoots his age, and I think most important to him, he can still beat me, and which he does regularly. However, he started giving back to the game long ago, and I think he's probably never forgot the early years. In the early 1970s, my dad helped found and run a regional golf tournament, and I remember these years. I remember them so clearly. I used to caddy for my dad, and if you haven't, I know this whole table back here does this every week, but if you haven't run a golf tournament, you just don't understand all the minutiae involved. And I have this clear memory of playing a tournament, or he's playing a tournament, I'm caddying. I'm about 13 years old. And he's doing well. I think he had shot 75 the first day. He's kind of in the hunt. We're on the 7th hole of Soaring Eagles. And all of a sudden, in the distance, we see a golf cart coming down the fairway. And it's the chef of the club. He's got the big chef hat on. And he's yelling, "Tom, Tom." And so he drives right up to us. And he says, "Tom, do you want me to bake the chicken or to grill it?" So this is, and he told him, and we went and played. But those years, those early years were very, they were so memorable. There's another time, just a real quick story. We were playing, and my dad's very decisive, and I think that's one of the reasons he's very good at this, at being officiating in matches. So we were, my brother Pat and I, Pat, you may remember this, we're at a tournament that Dad's running, and I might be 14 years old by now. My brother's a couple years younger than me. And we've got 150 players we got to get out. And it's 7 o'clock in the morning, this fog rolls in, you can't see anything. It comes, do you remember this? It gets to be 7:30, 7:45, and finally we got to get these golfers out. So he says, "Tommy, you go down the first fairway. It's pea soup out, you can't see anything. I want you to go down the first fairway, 220 yards, find a tree near the fairway, and we're going to hit, sort of hide behind the tree and just listen for it to land." And he says, "Pat, you go down the 10th fairway and do the same thing." So that here's the part where I call this the Sophie's Choice moment. Here's the part where his decisiveness really helped. He's got one construction hard hat. So he just told us, he says, "Here, Pat," and he hands it to my brother. Remember that? And so he continued to work at golf, and we, we would play together. In 1983, he began his career with the Golf Association. The next year, he was hired as the association's executive director. And now, things were different back then than they are today. The association has grown greatly, and I understand it has a big office, it's got staff. Back then, my dad was the staff, pretty much by himself. The office was wherever kind of nook or you could find in your house to put an Apple computer. And his tenure as executive director roughly coincided with his decision to downsize from this big Victorian home to a one-bedroom apartment. So it would not be uncommon to see you walk into the apartment and you would see a pile of men's state amateur entries here, pile of checks here with a deposit ticket always written out perfectly, pile neatly, and then a pile of folded laundry over here. And the entire, you should know this for the historians out there, the entire New York State Golf Association, all the amateur tournaments were powered by an Apple computer with 64K hard drive and a dot matrix spinner. So that's what we had. He worked hard. Every week there's 12 tournaments, so he would go out on Sunday night usually, drive to the venue, stay for the week, run the tournament. He'd come back Friday night, and then he'd come back, and my sister Katie would go to the post office to get all this mail, and he'd have to go through that. That's how he spent his weekends. He would go through all the mail and get the entry fees ready, and he'd have to send something back to the people that weren't getting in, and he was processing all this stuff. And then Sunday night he would go back out again. He still does. He still has this kind of schedule. After Dad served as executive director, he has spent another 20 some odd years as a volunteer. He's been the president of the association. He has been a committee member. He's traveled. I guess we have 12 tournaments now a year. I tried to write down some of the hats he wears, but he's a rules expert. Two people have already come up to me today and said how when they ever have a question about a rule, they call my father. He's a logistics specialist. Each venue is different, and you have to be able to see what's going on at that particular country club and how you're going to be able to get everybody, all the play in, and keep everybody happy. You have to be able to get along with the local people. And I think Ron Sokash can confirm this. My dad is a master with a can of spray paint. This is important. Let's see, the Golf Association people get this, but the lateral hazard lines don't just happen. Somebody's got to paint them. So this is what they do, is they come into a course and they've got to set it up for a competitive day. And he still does. He calls me Monday nights a lot, and he's just dog tired because he's been out there. Sometimes he's been out there 8-10 hours painting the course, and he does this week in and week out. When he's not on the road, he's also over the course of his tenure, he's recruited members, he's mentored people in the Golf Association. When he's not on the road, he encourages. This is one thing I think is really neat. He encourages local talent to go and play in these tournaments. He's always said, go test your game, see if your game travels, see if it will travel from one place to the next. And I think that's a great way to put it. More generally, he just promotes the game, the values of the game every day. He's out there, which is every day, pretty much. He's never forgotten where he's come from. He never forgot that, being a 12-year-old caddy that, had something that was very important to him. So tonight I would like everyone to know that my dad is someone who's never forgotten his roots and spent most of his life giving back. In all of that, he's been exemplary, and that is why we honor him tonight. I am humbly honored to introduce you, Dad, my father, Thomas Reidy.
Let's get one thing straight before I start. I would never let my children stand out on the top of a hill in the fog. Those were kind of fun. Those were kind of fun days, and the story about the chicken was true. And what really was upsetting is I had a 6-foot putt for a birdie, and in that round, at that time, I was 1 under par. I made a quick bogey on that hole, and then it went downhill from there. But anyway, thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank Renelle for the wonderful job she's done setting this up, the whole association. I love the staff. We get along really well. We have a lot of fun. They do all the work. In fact, last couple of years, like I remember we had a tournament, I think it was a year ago, wasn't it, when I found myself assigned to the snack shop at Bellevue. Of course, I make the assignments, so that worked pretty well. My family is all here. I got Eddie. He's if you didn't miss Eddie, he's the one with the Heineken's and the Nike shoes. And you met Tom. Next to Tom are good friends, the Whites and the Conleys. At the other table, there's Sue and Jim Rogers, Wendy, and my son Dan, and my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful grandchildren, Emily and Molly and Elizabeth. My son Patrick, and Mike and Katie. So they're all here, great people. Thank you all for coming. You know, it's funny how things happen and come together. Lyle Brown was president of the New York State Golf Association in 1983. Lyle Brown was a member of this club. He was also the basketball coach at Rochester, University of Rochester. And Sherry Heath, who was here, was chairman, I believe, of that tournament. I wasn't in the association. I was chairman of the tournament for Elmira Country Club. And, you know, I do like golf. I know that might come as a surprise to you, but Sherry asked me if I would start on the 10th tee one of those days. And oh my God, I thought that was, you know, this is a state championship, and I'm going to start. So I gladly accepted. One of the people that I started is sitting here with the Urzettas, Matt Clark. And we're on the 10th tee, Matt, at Elmira Country Club. And Matt hits his drive, leaves. There's not a tree on that hole. I mean, there's a few, it's the widest fairway on the golf course, and there's like 3 pine trees way up on the right. Well, Matt's ball started in that direction, and 5 minutes later, I see him walking back. He had a lost ball. The ball went in the pine tree and stayed in the pine tree. So I've known Matt, and we've been good friends ever since. I mean, I don't get too close to the players during tournaments, but, you know, before the tournament, I'm always saying hello to Matt, and when he's playing, I stay away from him, you know, 'cause I'm afraid they'll yell at me, those people, they get mad. That same year, at the end of that tournament, Lyle Brown asked me if I would be interested in stepping into the Sectional Affairs Committee of the association, which I accepted. A year later, I was contacted and asked if I was interested in the job of executive director. Well, I said I'd have to think about that, and I'd have to discuss it with my wife, kid's mother and grandmother, who we lost 4.5 years ago. And of course, Claire was such a wonderful person. She's just said, yeah, go for it, you know. She's also said, every time I'd complain about my golf game, 6 kids now, this is true, she'd say, you gotta play more. So anyway, I agreed to be considered. And another irony, the interview took place right upstairs. So I was interviewed here at the Country Club of Rochester, and I accepted the job as executive director. And I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It fit with my real job, which was a professor of accounting at Corning Community College. So it all worked out pretty well. It did get kind of tough. It got bigger and bigger, because just as our staff does now, every year we as an association would like to make it just a little bit better. Along those lines, I have one story I'd like to, I don't know if I should tell or not, or whether it fits. But we had a mid-amateur championship at a very prestigious club. And it was going great. Oh, the contestants loved it. We loved it. And I got invited out to dinner by one of our association members, who was a member at that club, and another member of that club who was part owner. And we're having a lovely dinner. And all of a sudden, part owner said to me, Tom, let me ask you a question. Why should we give up our golf course for 4 days to the New York State Golf Association? You know, I really wasn't expecting that kind of a question, but I thought for just a second, and I don't know if it's a good answer, but it was an answer that came from my heart. I said to him, I said, because, I said, you have a wonderful, wonderful golf course here. It is a special golf course. And I think along with that comes the responsibility of sharing it with serious amateur golfers. And I believe that today. I think that we have a responsibility to promote the game of golf. Our charter says that we promote the game of golf by running championships. I think we do a pretty good job of running our championships. Our staff is phenomenal. I mean, today it's crazy. When I think back of the old days, no, I couldn't play today. You can't play today. You can't play amateur golf if you don't have a smartphone. It's impossible. You look at Andrew. Andrew's got the starting time for the next day on that smartphone and like that, and I can't turn one on, so I couldn't play. Of course, I never was able to play because I could never qualify. I tried several times and never made it. And then Sam. I love Sam. I got to meet him late. I got to meet him when we had a golf tournament here, and it poured. it just poured and poured. And I knew who Sam Rosetta was. Everybody in golf who was anybody knew who Sam Rosetta was. Well, it is raining so hard and we want to get this tournament started. And I'm out in the middle of the first green, squeegeeing that first green. And who's next to me squeegeeing but Sam Rosetta? And I thought to myself, what in the world? I'm working alongside of Sam Rosetta. And I was so impressed with Sam. And it got so whenever I'd get to Rochester, I'd stop in and say hello. One year, came up for the U.S. Open. I was a committeeman in the USGA also. And I had a pass for the Open. I had a parking permit. And unfortunately, it rained and my parking got demoted into a lake, I think. So I said, well, I'm not going to go there today. I'm going back to the motel. So I pull into the parking lot and I went in to say hello to Sam. And he said, how come you're not over at the Open? Well, I told him, lost my parking place. And he said, Tom, you park here. The rest of the week, you park here. There's a bus going over every 20 minutes. You'll be fine. So that's the kind of guy Sam Rosetta was. Wonderful man. Later years, when I came, I didn't go in the front door of the pro shop. I went in the bag room. That's where Sam was. Again, I'd like to thank the association. This is an undeserved honor, but a greatly, greatly appreciated honor. Thank you very much.
He's wrong about one thing, it was deserved. Very highly deserved. He's been a mentor to many of us over the past, I've only been a member of the association for the last 11 years, and Tom has been a great mentor to me and helped me out very much over the years. So I want to thank him again for that. The next person we're introducing is also associated with the Country Club of Rochester. His name is Donald Ross. Donald, we didn't have anyone to present, so I volunteered to do that. So I'm going to spend a few minutes trying to give you a little background on Donald Ross. This morning, I took what was probably a 35 or 40-minute speech and toned it down because Renell told me I had to keep it under 10 minutes. So hopefully I've done that. Donald Ross was born in Dornoch, Scotland on November 23rd, 1872. All of the children of the village, as they became old enough, usually around 10 years old, began to caddy at the local golf club until their teenage years. At that point, they apprenticed. Whatever their career was going to be, they apprenticed with one of the local tradesmen. And he was no different. He was a caddy from the age of 10 to 14, and then began apprenticing with a local carpenter who also happened to be a very avid golfer himself. Something happened during those years that had a great influence on him. Old Tom Morris came over from St. Andrews to Dornoch to design the first 9 holes in 1886 and returned in 1892 to complete the back 9. And Donald, the following year in 1893, Donald followed him to St. Andrews and apprenticed at St. Andrews with him. He also apprenticed with a man named David Forgan, who was the local club maker. And he used his carpentry skills to become an expert club maker, designer and club maker. The next year, in 1894, Donald went to Carnoustie to apprentice there. And when he returned in November of 1894, Donald Ross was hired to be the head club maker and greenskeeper at his home course in Dornoch. His yearly salary was 30 pounds, probably a little more today, but 30 pounds with lessons in club making and all the other income. He made about 100 pounds in 1898. That's worth about $500 today, or at least, or then. During that year, 1990, Robert Wilson, who was a professor of astronomy at Harvard University, showed up at his club to play a round of golf with his wife. And on August 23rd, 1898, after his round, he sat down and talked to Donald Ross for quite a while, and eventually later that week offered him the job as the head professional at his club in Watertown, Massachusetts, Oakley Country Club. It was a guaranteed salary of $60 a month, an increase, certainly an increase over what he was making then, plus 50 cents per lesson. When he added all that up, he said he just couldn't afford not to go there. So on March 13th of 1899, he left Dornick to sail to the United States. In April 1899, he stood on the grounds of Oakley Golf Club and saw nothing more than a muddy field with 11 holes roughly laid out on land which was mainly clay and gravel. And if you know anything about Donald Ross, he always said it was you should never build a golf course on clay or gravel. It should always be a sandy mix. He obviously over the years did both, but by the 1901 season he had turned the club into an 18-hole course. That was the first course that he designed in the United States, actually the first course he designed anywhere in his career. And from there, Donald became the head professional at Oakley for approximately 10 years, and was instrumental in increasing the membership and the play of golf in the Boston, Massachusetts area over those years. In 1908, he was brought over to Essex Country Club, redesigned their course into an 18-hole course, and was their pro from 1910 until 1913. While all this was going on, a man named James Tuff, who had made a fortune designing and marketing soda fountain equipment across the country, wanted to do something with all the money he had earned, and he wanted to try to help people who needed help. He bought a parcel of land in North Carolina, 6,000 acres in North Carolina for $7,400. He bought it to build a health resort for people with tuberculosis and other ailments. He named this property Pinehurst. And in 1898, a 9-hole course was constructed by, there's no record of who constructed it, but someone constructed a 9-hole course at Pinehurst. He met Donald Ross, though, because in the summers he would come up and play at Essex Country Club, at Essex Country Club. And met Donald Ross, invited him to his home, and offered him the job to come down during the winter and be the pro at Pinehurst. When Donald arrived there, he redesigned the number 1 hole, and in 1907, he designed what is now the famous number 2 hole at Pinehurst. He's one of the greatest golf designers in history. In fact, no less an authority as Jack Nicklaus wrote that Donald Ross has had profound impact on the golf course architecture. He seems to be the standard by which all are measured even today. His designs are still studied by people studying to be modern architects, and Donald Ross designed at least 399 courses throughout the United States and Canada. I say at least because there are records that show he may have designed as many as 600 courses. He is in the World Golf Hall of Fame, but why do we put him in the New York State Hall of Fame? He designed courses in 45 of the 48 states. There were 48 states at that time, if anybody is not old enough to realize that. He designed 50 courses in Massachusetts, 44 in North Carolina, but only 32 in New York. The reason he is being inducted in the Hall of Fame class is the quality of the courses he designed here. In Rochester, he designed the Country Club of Rochester course in 1913. This was the second course he had designed in the state, but the oldest that still exists. The first course he designed was in 1912, and that course disappeared a few years later. Monroe Golf Club, he designed Oak Hill, East and West, the Brooklyn and Irondequoit, just here in Rochester. He also did the Country Club of Buffalo, Bellevue Country Club in Syracuse, Glen Falls Country Club, the Sagamore Resort and Golf Club, and the only municipal course among them, in Elmira, New York, the Mark Twain Golf Course, still owned by the city of Elmira. All of these courses have hosted New York State Golf Association tournaments and qualifiers in recent years. In fact, Oak Hill hosted an event last Monday. Even today, when you say it is a Donald Ross design, that carries a great impact and an expectation of excellence. And I think we've discovered that recently around any courses we've had. Anytime we've had a Donald Ross course, has always been a very exceptional tournament. I'd like to give you a little story about one of the courses he designed in New York State. In Rome, New York, there's a lovely course, if you haven't played it, it'd be worth going to sometime, named Teugica. Teugica Country Club was designed by Donald Ross in 1920. While he was there, he and his family met and became very close to a woman named Susan Comstock Aldrich, who was a resident of Rome, New York. In fact, his daughter, Lillian, began calling her Aunt Susie. Susan then began visiting them in the winter when she went down with friends to Pinehurst each winter. And she and Lillian and also Donald's wife Janet became inseparable. Janet died of cancer, Donald's wife Janet died of cancer in February 1922, and Susan sent a letter of condolence. Donald became a frequent visitor to Rome, New York for the next 2 years. He and Susan became fast friends, and eventually they became engaged in April of 1923. Susan also happened to be a fine golfer. In fact, she was the first club champion at Teugica in 1921. But they were playing one day, and Donald Ross, at the age of 50, had his first hole-in-one at Teugica on the 7th hole. And their engagement lasted a short period of time because, sadly, Susan died of cancer in August 1923 with Donald Ross at her bedside. I've heard other stories where there was an extramarital affair. Was not true. They had that. She was actually friends with his wife before his wife had passed. Donald Ross was a founding member and first president of the American Society of Golf Course Architects, which was formed at Pinehurst in 1947. He was also named to the World Golf Hall of Fame in 1977. He passed away in 1947 at the age of 75 while completing his final design of the Raleigh Country Club in Raleigh, North Carolina. A good question I think anybody could ask are, is the design still relevant today? I think those of us that even in the wet conditions played this course yesterday, yes, they are still relevant. But just to go a bit further, this past fall, the Barclays, the first leg of the FedEx finals, were played at Plainfield Country Club in New Jersey, a Donald Ross design. The last event, the tournament championship, was at East Lake in Atlanta, and also a Donald Ross design. He designed Plainfield in 1928 and the East Lake course in 1925. And recently it was announced again that Oak Hill will host the PGA Championship in 2023. I think those are a sign of how important Donald Ross was and still is to the game of golf. What I've done, I didn't put a watch up here. How am I doing? Okay, I've got a few quotes. Donald wrote a journal. He never wrote a book, but he did write a journal that was published a few years ago called "Golf Has Never Failed Me," and in that they have quotes from his journal. I'd like to read you a few of those that I think are fitting for today's events. These are my standards in laying out a golf course. Make each hole present a different problem. So arrange it that every stroke must be made with a full concentration and attention necessary to good golf. Build each hole in such a manner that it wastes none of the ground at my disposal and takes advantage of every possibility I can see. The ideal course is one that presents a test of golf for the everyday golfer and the first-class golfer. A properly designed course can take care of every class of golfer. My aim is to bring out of the player the best golf that is in him. The hazards and bunkers are placed so as to force a player to use judgment and to exercise mental control in making the correct shot. It is best not to make the first two holes or so too difficult. Give the player the chance to warm up a bit and get the swing of his stroke well under control, then give him some real nuts to crack. Difficult holes at the start are also apt to cause congestion, holding up the play of subsequent players, much to their annoyance. We've all seen that. A course that continually offers problems, one with fight in it, if you please, is the one that keeps the player keen for the game. Here's one I've often had discussions with people about. There is no such thing as a misplaced bunker. Regardless of where a bunker may be, it is up to the player to avoid it. This might be interesting to anyone that's a club professional. Greenscaping is destined to be the very important and lucrative profession of really far greater importance than the club profession. The sign, replace all divots, can be seen all over every course. Yet if one takes the trouble to watch players, it is apparent that very few read the signs. I do not believe that replacing the divot helps in any way to get roots still left on the ground to grow again, but replacing divots does certainly help the player feel a certain amount of responsibility in the care of the course. I'd like to just read a couple more and then we'll close up on this. As long as we keep golf a game of honor, we are on the right road. The game does more to bring out the finer points in a man's character than any other sport. A country which gets golf-minded need not worry about the honor, the integrity, and the honesty of its people. It is very satisfying to be connected with golf. I feel happy to realize that it is to be one of the country's biggest industries. For I believe wholeheartedly in golf. I owe the game a great deal, and the way I can repay it is by helping to keep it the finest game in the world. Having read a great deal about Donald Ross over the past few weeks, he has become when we're asked who are the 4 people you would like to meet at some time in your life, he's become one of those people I would like to meet if that wish could ever come true. He's a fascinating person. I would recommend the book that gives his thoughts. It's a quick read. Some chapters are 1 paragraph, some are 3 or 4 pages, but they're a fascinating outlook on golf and a man that did a lot for golf, both in Europe and in this country. We have a plaque for him. We intend to mail that plaque to his granddaughter, who is still alive and lives in Rhode Island. And hopefully if we get everything together, we'll have that tour in the next few weeks. So we're not going to... The next person we're presenting tonight was unable to be with us. Her name is Lancey Smith. Lancey is one of the most accomplished amateur women golfers in the country, and probably the most accomplished I have seen in this state. I would like to invite Iris Stanek, also a member of our committee, to the podium to introduce Lancey Smith.
And I'm so happy that so many of the families could be here. Every senior woman in Western New York knows who Lancey Smith is. And I say senior because the young ones, they don't get it. They just don't get it. They go out and they play tournaments, and when they hear the name Lancey Smith, it's like, who's she? So we say, Lancey Smith is she's a demure 5'3" woman who was taught by her dad to hit the ball straight, keep it in the fairway, and keep it in play. Some of these people actually may have heard of Lancey, about her achievements, or may have experienced competing against her in the Buffalo District events or in USGA qualifiers, as I had the privilege of doing. By the time I won the USGA Publix qualifier, Lancey had already moved on to playing in the Curtis Cup. Each time the players would show up in the morning of the tournaments, one of the first questions everybody would ask, who's playing? Lancey playing? Well, yeah. Okay, ladies, it's a walk in the park today, and just let's have fun. Lancey was just 8 years old when her dad, William Smith, introduced her to the game, that she would embrace and become the best woman golfer, as Dick said, in Western New York, a title she still holds to this day. Her accomplishments and records are worthy of a true champion. She won her first New York State Women's Amateur Championship in 1966 at the tender age of 18. From that point on, there was no stopping her. On a national level, Lancey became recognized as one of the best amateur golfers in the United States. From 1970 to 1984, she was ranked in the top 10 women amateurs by Golf Digest magazine 12 different times, 11 times consecutively, including number 1 in 1980. She won the transnational tournament in 1993. Internationally, she played on the Curtis Cup team in 1972, 78, 80, 82, and 84. She was also an alternate 4 times for the Curtis Cup team. The Curtis Cup team competes against the best women amateurs from England and Ireland. Sort of the women's, well, now it's the Solheim Cup, but back then it was just England and Ireland. And she achieved one of her proudest honors when she was named captain of the 1994 team. She qualified and competed in 15 U.S. Women's Opens. She made it to the semifinals of the U.S. Women's Amateur in 1971 before losing to Laura Baugh. And I hope some of you still recognize her name. Laura had a 25-year career on the LPGA Tour. Lancey entered the South Florida amateur tournaments and won the Western Championship in 1974 and the Eastern Championship in 1970, 71, 73, and 74. She won the Women's Buffalo District Golf Association Championship 16 times. She also championship the Women's Golf Association of Western New York in 1970, 71, and 90. Basically, she was flying everywhere. She was in Buffalo, she was in Florida, she was overseas, she was wherever she could drive to, she drove to compete. Wherever she could fly to, she flew to compete. Golf was so ingrained in her. When her dad taught her how to play, she had 2 brothers and also a sister. Dad would come home every day from work, and he would take 4 kids and go out and play golf. Sometimes they dragged Mom along, and Mom was just there for, as someone mentioned, giggles. She was there to have fun, keep the atmosphere light, and just kind of nag everybody and say, come on, let's go here. So she was just all over the place, and the kids would go out every day after the dad came home from work, and they would play, and Dad just made it a whole family atmosphere every single evening. Her record for wins in New York State tournaments is just as impressive as her Buffalo District Championships, 16 times. She won the Women's Amateur in championship in 1966, 69, and 79. She won the Women's Senior Amateur Championship in 1998, 99, 2001, and as recent as 2002. She was inducted into the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame in 1994, which is another great honor. Lancey's amateur career spanned 4 decades, and in those 4 decades, she amassed a minimum of 32 championships. Lancey is a very quiet, she's a very private, she's a very personal person, and she never wanted the accolades that she received over the years and for all the championships that she won. She went out because she wanted to play golf, she loved the game of golf, and that's what her big thing was I don't need presentations. I don't need awards. I just love the game of golf. So she asked me to express her deepest regrets that she is not able to accept her award in person. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I am very proud and honored to present Lancey Smith, forever enshrined into the New York State Hall of Fame.
We have come to our final inductee now. You may have wondered what the order was. The order was alphabetical. It's sort of fitting. It's sort of fitting, though, the way the order worked out. Sam Rosetta had a wonderful amateur and professional career in golf and was the head professional here for 32 years. For your information, the dessert you had tonight was requested by the chef because it was Sam's favorite dessert. The chocolate cake part of it, at least. To introduce you to Sam, I am going to call Matt Clark up in a moment to the podium, but I'd also like to mention Matt is a member of the NYSGA State Committee and has been for a number of years. He's also, I can't read my own writing here because I wrote it. I met with Matt a few minutes ago and did all this in pen. He's a former employee at CCR. He worked in the pro shop with Sam before, well, probably during high school and college, and then when he moved to Albany, of course. But he said he gave Sam credit for teaching him everything he knew about the golfing and the golf swing, except for throwing clubs and putting. Someone else taught him those things. He returned to, he won the Invitational here in 2000, and then returned again when we hosted a New York State mid-amateur tournament in 2005, and was the champion in that. He's still got a great game. This summer we had a mid-amateur championship in the Albany area, and he finished second in that tournament with a nice, I think, a 69 on the final day. So I would like to invite Matt to come up to the stage and introduce our final recipient.
Welcome, everybody. As a good friend of mine in Troy always used to tell me, you get excited for these types of things, and right now I'm, as he would say, more excited than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Whatever that means. Nervous, excited, humbled in a lot of ways. I've been smiling sitting here the whole time, partly trying to keep Timmy awake, and partly just because I love listening to the golf talk. I could talk about it all night long without notes, but to spare you, I'm going to stick to my script so it doesn't go 6 hours more. Before I talk about Sam Rosetta, I'd like to congratulate the other Hall of Fame inductees this evening. To be in the presence of champions like Dr. Konsek and to hear Lancey Smith. These are legends I've known all my golfing life, and it's a tremendous thrill to be around them. Tom Reidy, you're consistent as the sun coming up every day. I've been playing in golf, state golf events for over 40 years, and you reminded me about that lost ball on the first hole at Elmira. But so I've known Tom for 35 years, and I think he's been at every single state event I've ever played in. And it's a very deserving honor, for your commitment to the game. Donald Ross is an icon of the game, obviously. As Dick said earlier, he'd be one of my top answers when asked to make up my dream foursome. My Uncle Timmy and I went to Scotland in 1991 and had the good fortune to play Royal Dornoch, and you can see where that vision and inspiration comes from playing that golf course. It's just a wonderful place, and he's obviously had a huge impact on the game. I'd also like to thank the Country Club of Rochester and the membership here for really supporting the game in so many ways. club has always and continues to embody the spirit that this great game is. And you know, when you do play this golf course now, you know, I've been playing it for a long, long time in various invitationals and other events, and just to come back here and see it and get out there in the grass and amongst the trees, it's a beautiful, beautiful track. Lastly, I'd like to thank the entire Zeta family for having the confidence in me to present their father. I'm profoundly honored, as I've always viewed Sam as a tremendous role model, a mentor, and really my second father. One of my vivid, memories of Country Club of Rochester is, early June, the Invitational goes on, and most years it's beautiful June days and sun's coming up, it's blue sky, and I'd come to the first tee and my dad would be sitting next to Sam under the tent behind the first tee, and that's, I can just see it right now. It's just it's a fun memory for me. Quick overview of Sam's athletic accomplishments, and I say athletic because he wasn't just a golfer. U.S. Amateur Champion in 1950. He was named to 2 winning Walker Cup teams in 51 and 53. Sam went undefeated in both matches. Pretty impressive there. I did actually get to play Konsek, where he played in the U.S. on the Walker Cup, and it's just a really special place. And I wouldn't have gone down there other than John Blaine called me and said, "Oh, you want to go to Konsek and play in the Senior Open qualifier?" And I'm like, "Where's Konsek?" And he goes, "It's down in Massachusetts. Sam played a Walker Cup there." And I said, "I'm in. We're in. Let's go." Sam won 3 Monroe Invitationals, which is now a very prominent national event. He won the New York State Amateur in 1948. He won the Rochester District Golf Association Championship in 1947 and 1950. He played in 12 major championships, including a 12th place finish at the 1956 Masters. Became the head pro here in 1956, and actually was here for 37 years as the pro, and then he became the pro emeritus and continued to stay and give advice and help people. Prior to his golf professional career, he actually played a lot of basketball, and I see Joe, Peter, and Michael, and I know they all had basketball as very prominent parts of their upbringing, and Sammy used to, he'd leave here in the later part of the winter, early June or early spring, and he'd always go home and watch NBA games till all hours of the evening. And just loved the game of basketball. He was a member. He was an inaugural member of the 1969 St. Bonaventure Hall of Fame, partly for golf, but also because he held he actually led the country in free throw shooting when he played at St. Bonnie's. He shot over 90% for the year, and from what I was told, it was a record that held up for about 30 years. And he actually shot underhand, which they don't do anymore. Number 5039, 5039, if you can see that. It's a kind of an interesting number for me. When Sam died, I was actually heading to Pebble Beach and wasn't able to be here for his funeral, but I was on the 18th tee there, and I just wrote 5039 on my golf ball and beat it as far out into the ocean as I could, and in memory of Sam. The year 1950, in the final match in the championship, went 39 holes. So to me, that's a prominent number. I came to the CCR invitation. I had told my uncle that, and there's a box of Titleists with the imprint 5039 in the side of them. So he took that seriously, and we thought that was a nice thing. Most people remember Sam with that amateur championship. Most people know about Sam because of that national championship. I've often wondered, about that week and what he was going through that tournament, and playing competitive golf all my life. I've kind of been in awe of how you think about each day. How do you go to sleep the night before? And I really regret not asking him more questions about that tournament. And I know Frank Stranahan was one up going up the 36th hole, and he was on the green in regulation. Sam was short-sided. Sam chipped it to about 6 feet. Frank Stranahan three putted and Sam made the putt, so they went extra holes, and the 39th hole, Stranahan hit it out of bounds and Sam won the tournament. And you know, it's kind of an interesting thing, but I always think about what went through his mind at that point. You know, what was he thinking about on that final hole? What was his confidence like each day going into that tournament, through the tournament? A lot of emotional ebbs and flows, and what do you actually feel like? I never asked him what he actually felt like when that match was over and he was the national champion. One thing I do know is that while it changed his life in so many ways, it really didn't change him as a man. His legacy was that he stayed true to his values, his faith, his family, and his community. He was beloved by all and treated everyone he met with kindness and respect. And I think everybody that's ever met him would echo that sentiment. He touched thousands of lives with his talent, with his golf clubs. The win in the U.S. Amateur was obviously national news, and I've actually heard stories about people that were huddled around their radios in Rochester here, trying to hear the results of the final match. You know, he also touched a lot of people with his knowledge of the game as an instructor and a teacher. You know, as a bagroom kid, I used to pick up the range every night, and I'd get a chance to hit some balls out on the practice holes. And, you know, in between lessons, sometimes Sam would take his card out and stand next to me, and he'd look at me and just say, stick your butt out a little more and open up a little and let it go. That was all he would tell me, and bang, I'd start hitting the ball solid again. You know, I did some conservative math, because he used to keep a book in the drawer by the counter in the front of the pro shop, and, you know, people would sign up for lessons, people would call for lessons, members, outside folks, and I figured in the 10 years I worked here, he probably taught about 3,000 lessons, and that's probably conservative, and that's just 10 years, you know, like in the middle, and I think that's actually what kind of pushed me away from trying to turn professional and be a club pro, is because I couldn't figure out how Sam could stand out there all day in the sun and, you know, watch people, you know, dribble them off here and dribble them off there. That was tough, you know, but he was passionate about his calling. He found ways to endure and cure the foozles and the hosel rockets, the dubs and the skulls, and he would figure out somehow to get each of the students to get to the point where they could actually hit a good shot. And he told me once, you know, and I remember this vividly, he said, you know, the feeling you get in your hands after you hit a good shot is so much, it lasts so much longer than that clunky feel when you hit a bad shot. And I just remember that. And I think everybody that's ever hit a golf ball, like right in the middle of the sweet spot, that's the greatest feeling you can have in golf. You know, his whole idea was to help people get better at golf and to actually enjoy it. He knew all the angles and the positions of the golf swing. There was lots of photos of, you know, great golfers in his office in the pro shop, and but I think what he really helped you do was he talked about a feeling. He helped somebody discover a concept, and, you know, something that would just translate how complicated the game was into something everyday. You know, he'd tell me about sweeping the floor with a 3-wood, you know, just brushing the top of the grass with a 3-wood, and you know, hit it solid that way, and he'd allow people to actually hit it better that way. All those lessons he gave. We all know about the tournaments that Sammy won, you know, that he was a Walker Cupper and a true golfing champion, but I firmly believe ultimately it was his ability to teach and help people improve that gave him the most pride in the game of golf. I wrote down a few words, you know, I was preparing for this, and I do want to thank Jim Merva for having knee surgery, so I would actually get up here and talk. Jim was supposed to present Sam, and Michael called me a couple weeks ago and said Jim had knee surgery, or had to reschedule some knee surgery. He wouldn't be in good shape. And I said, oh, I'm in, let me do that, please. But these are some words that I just was thinking about that describe Sam. His hands. He always had, you know, I've met a few people in the game of golf that were great players, and I've always noticed how good their hands were. And he was a great ball striker. He's a great iron player, and he obviously had hands to throw the ball into the basket in the game of basketball. Humility. Sam never talked much about the tournament success or his fame. He took it all very easily in stride. And John Blaine, another member of the committee who couldn't be here tonight, told me a couple weeks ago, Sam had the uncanny knack of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room. You know, you just felt like you were with the most important person in the room when you're with him, but he just made you feel that way. His dedication and his commitment, most would be hard-pressed to find another man that was more dedicated to his job, more committed to his community and the membership here at the Country Club of Rochester. Honor and faith, like most people, you know, born into the era of the greatest generation, Sam had a deep sense of honor to his fellow man and his faith in God. Of all the years I worked here, I don't think he ever missed your early mass on Saturday evening. He couldn't obviously go on Sunday morning because that was a big day on the golf course. He was very consistent. He just, like Tom Reidy, he was there all the time. He was present. He just had that consistency. Here's a funny word that, almost an inside joke, but tripe. Sam looked forward to Mondays, not because he could play golf somewhere around Rochester, but because he could take a little time away from the club and go downtown to Rockies and have a bowl of tripe, which I couldn't figure out why that was something. That was the cake was a new one to me. I never heard he liked chocolate cake. Devotion. You know, if Sam were here now before you, I'm 100% positive that he'd be gushing on and on. Not about this honor or the U.S. Amateur Championship, but about his family. He would be honoring his parents and his siblings, thanking his wonderful wife, Mary Ellen, for sticking by him in the unconventional duties of being a golf professional. He'd be talking about the strength that his 4 children, Helen, Joseph, Peter, and Michael, have given him through the years, and he would be beaming about all the joy he's gotten from his grandkids and the rest of his family. Then he'd probably tell you a joke. He was very good with a joke. He had a knack for being on the stage. He and No Knocks over at the Northside Inn would do little stand-up routines. I truly wish he could be here to receive the honor because he really did deserve this. He gave a lot to golf. Without any further ado, I'm privileged and profoundly honored to present Sam Rosetta to the Hall of Fame of the New York State Golf Association. You stand in the middle. Rose between 2 thorns. Actually, give this to Michael. Take him down.
You're supposed to stay up here, Mom. Like my father, she doesn't like to be in the spotlight either. First of all, I just, for those of you that knew my father, he liked his homilies and his speeches the same way, brief. So I will try to honor him in that regard. But first of all, I want to recognize and congratulate all the other inductees. These are people that have done wonderful things, not only in the game of golf, but for the game of golf. So congratulations, everybody. You know, and trying to figure out what to say up here tonight, you know, I just try to think about the people that I know my dad would want to thank. First of all, to the New York State Golf Association. He'd be incredibly humbled by this honor. So to the association, thank you very much on behalf of my dad and my family. It's greatly appreciated. He would also, as Matt said earlier, he would want to thank his family. First of all, his wife, my mom, Mary Ellen, again, like Matt said, to stick by the life of a golf professional for a lot of years and 4 kids, and she was just the love of his life. So, and then to all my brothers and sisters and all his grandchildren, He was a huge family guy. You know, I think, like Dr. Konsek said, you know, I think Dad probably had that opportunity to go and do some other stuff in golf, and you know, chose a different path, and his family was very important, and a big reason why he chose that path. He would also want to thank all his friends, a multitude of friends. I know he would reach out especially to his dear friend who basically introduced him to the game of golf, was Frank Camiso. Frank was a longtime golf professional at Irondequoit Country Club, a great player in his own right, a mentor and a father figure to my dad. So he would really want to point out and thank Frank. Also to the members of the Country Club of Rochester and the club itself, have been a huge part of his life. We're always so supportive of him and continue to be supportive of our family. So many people, even today, we've got a couple of members in the crowd that even thought as much to put on a little kind of event today and have some folks come out and honor this. So it's things like that that the Country Club of Rochester is all about, and we really do appreciate that. You know, the game of golf, I think it touched my father's life in a lot of ways, but I think more importantly to him, it allowed him to touch other people's lives. And just in hearing some of the folks mention them, you know, tonight in conversation, I think that's very apparent. So, you know, I guess in closing, you know, I think some of the people that have been so important along the way to him are still people that are here today, and he would greatly appreciate the friendship of all those folks, and would want me to tell you that. You know, there's nothing that he'd be more proud of than to have this honor. And again, just from our family to the New York State Golf Association, you know, thank you all so very much. It was a great evening, and I promised I'd be brief. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and thanks again, everybody, for everything.
Okay, we've come to the conclusion of this evening. I think it's went rather well. I'd like to, on behalf of the association, congratulate the inductees that we have here and welcome them into the New York State Hall of Fame. I'd also like to thank the Hall of Fame committee for coming up with these nominees. I'd like to thank the Country Club of Rochester for giving us this location, this meal, which I thought was pretty good, especially the cake. And I'd like to thank the staff who helped set a lot of this thing up. I'd also like to especially thank Ronell Graber. Ronell did a lot of work on this, and probably hounded some of you, you know, to make sure she had the tickets right and everything, and did an excellent job in setting this whole thing up. For those of you who don't know, Ronell is going to be leaving us at the end of this month, and we're going to miss her terribly. So thank you very much, Ronell.
Thank you.
And lastly, I'd like to thank all of you for coming, because I think you've made this more memorable for our inductees. Everyone seemed to talk family, and you're the family. So thank you for coming, and have a good night.